it does always feel like something where they're still teenage heroes. They're still going through high school. There's still lots of things, new things to come up. So I think that there is not a one size fits all approach. Sometimes a story just starts telling you that it's not over yet.
This last episode was insane, which is saying something because the episode before that had a bear battle map.
It's true. I can barely believe it. Yay!
I love your character. Can you talk to me about when you were creating Tula, specifically why you wanted to play the mother of two young children and an adult daughter? Because it creates so many interesting dynamics.
It's really interesting, right? I mean, Tula. So I knew coming in what the source material and the genre is. And I've said before that it's a very almost like teacher's pet style mentality where like whatever genre the DM has set, I'm trying to listen to their tuning fork and do exactly that, right? My biggest fear is having a character that's like not in line with the tone, mood, and genre that a DM is going for. So, the material that this is based on, which is like Watership Down, Secret of Nim. Me and Aria had talked about Secret of Nim a lot before. And obviously of the cast, I was present during the kind of like lead up, being behind the scenes at Dimension 20, talking to Aria about her vision for the season. And, early on, I was like, knowing the source material, we talked a lot about Secret of Nim. Mrs. Brisby is one of my favorite all-time characters. And so that's there's a huge, huge piece of Mrs. Brisby from The Secret of Nim that is within Tula. And specifically that idea of a very heroic, very soft-spoken, tender, comforting character that feels like a lot of what Tula is about. But when characters were being generated, like Erica, so I knew I wanted something in the Mrs. Brisby space, but it wasn't like I didn't know who other people were going to be. I didn't even know if we were going to be a family. There was a world where we were like a disconnected series of stoats, and I was adventuring for my kids who were NPCs. But immediately, Siobhan was like, I want to be a little boy. And Erica was like, I want to be an old, grizzled grandma. So being in the midst of this family as an adult daughter, it's kind of a constellation that came about through everybody else's choices, where I went, oh God, like Mrs. Brisby doesn't have a mom in Secret of Nim. So this was very much like for Tula, it's like, oh my God, this is really interesting. And then, Rashawn being my sister, it was basically just everyone picked a generation and then all kind of gravitated into their shape. So the kids needed moms. The mom needed like this. There were two kind of like adult women that made sense to be sisters, and then there was an older matriarchal figure, and it just made sense for like if we're sisters, that should be our mom.
It's so much fun, and then you say something really impactful in this episode. I can't put any more effort into being a daughter. Can you talk to me about that moment and kind of creating that relationship with Erica and the difficulties there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a part of growing older where to some degree you've packed or unpacked what happened to you in childhood. You have feelings about it. You've resolved those feelings or you haven't. Your relationship with your parents is good or it's bad or whatever else happened. But I think that there is a moment in adulthood where you suddenly go like, oh, the project of my own life, and especially going into parenthood, where you go, this is all I have bandwidth for. It's taking everything I've got just to keep my own house in order. And whether you have a very present parental figure like we do in Burrows End, or whether your parents are not sort of with you, I think there's a moment where there is a service being asked of you as a child, like how do I honor and respect my parents or my elder generation? And there's a service being asked of you by your children. And if you are being drained really hard, you don't feel like you have the energy that everybody is asking for, there is, you have to kind of break in some of those. Yeah. And I feel like for Tula, at least, her decision, and it might not be everyone's decision, but her decision is, I have to give to my kids. My relationship with my mom is going to be whatever it's going to be. I'm not going to be disrespectful towards her. I'm not going to be whatever. But it's like, and I think part of that, what you see with Tula is that she doesn't have the space to fight her mom. It's not like she's like, I don't have time for you. What it is it's like, I don't have the bandwidth to like go toe to toe with my mom. I just have to use whatever energy I have to be present for my kids.
Yeah, because it really feels like the way she grew up has had a huge impact on how she parents, because Tula always goes out of the way to apologize to her kids and always goes out of the way to like encourage and praise her kids, even in the midst of the craziness that's going on.
The backstory that our fans of the show might not know, but that me and Rashawn talked about, is that Tula used to be very rebellious and used to be very strong-headed. When she was a teenager, she was kind of a hellion. She was like a much more like asserting herself with all that extra energy that she had. And like you see some of that in the fact that Jeffrey was like not approved by her mom, but she had that marriage anyway. And I think the Tula we see in the modern day, it's not who she is all the time. It's who she is now. There's an element of like the softness and the tenderness and the exhaustion is kind of a reaction to tragedy in a lot of ways. Like, and you can see little bits and pieces of that throughout. That there is like, in other ways, it's almost like she is a soldier who's like put down the sword and shield. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah. I used to have this side of my personality that was really, assertive, and that's not what's called for anymore. So yeah, but you can see it in that like she's very much tried to, I think, establish herself as a parent in opposition to a lot of how her mother was. Like being like, and I think that that's something people can relate to. There's a lot of like, how are you going to differentiate or break the cycle a little bit in terms of how she speaks to Jason and Lila. It's very, and yeah, being very sweet and encouraging. But also not permissive, like trying to like have those boundaries, but also show a lot of love. It's interesting. It's very cool. The information that Erica and then Siobhan and Izzy are providing and trying to be in the middle of all that is deeply gratifying.
We really get the first mention of like in-depth knowledge about Jeffrey in this episode. Like I loved how Tula defended him from her kids' kind of anger for him being gone. I thought it was very cool that we learned that he could read scratches like Lila can. Can you talk a little bit about those moments and why it was so important to show that really different side of Tula? Because that's one of the first times we've really seen her get angry. Tula's
very close to my heart. So a lot of that stuff is very, there's like not a, Tula's not someone that I feel like I had to stretch very much to be able to play. She feels really close to home. And I think that something that I share with Tula is, especially when someone's not with us anymore, there's that feeling. It's like, it's not that you want to lionize, you don't want to take off all the rough edges. People are complicated, but it's just being very careful about someone who's not here to defend themselves. And for Tula, especially, of like wanting to set the record straight. And I think probably something that Tula is aware of is, on the one hand, anger is a great spackle over grief. So if you can be angry at your dead dad, you don't have to feel the hard feelings about the fact that like people and stoats will go way out of their way to feel a negative feeling if it lets them feel some control over the world. So like, dad's gone, let's make it his fault because then it happened for a reason. Versus I think where Tula's trying to come from, which is, it didn't happen for a reason. it just happened. The flip side of that, if I'm going to analyze Tula a little bit, is I think if she had perfectly processed all of her anger about Jeffrey being gone, she wouldn't be getting angry. Like in other words, Tula is probably seeing something in her kid's anger that she recognizes in herself. She probably has her own voice that is angry that Jeffrey took risks, that is angry that he went out and did something else. So when her kids repeat it, there's probably some guilt of like, oh, are they picking up my own resentment or anger? Yeah. And so I think her volume at like, don't talk about your dad that way. That's a voice that's also turned inwards. She's also scolding herself for having when she scolds her kids for saying it, she also gets to scold herself for thinking it.
Kind of on the more silly side, can you talk about creating that dynamic with Izzy and Siobhan and playing your wife's mom?
It's great. It's like, that's the most fun thing in the world. We're performers, we're actors. Like I hope that over the course of many wonderful seasons of the show, we get to be enemies and friends and rivals and mother and daughter and father and brother and cousin and all, it's just great fun. It's very fun to wear masks. Wearing masks is really, really fun, and examining those other relationships is, I think, really, really great. And Siobhan, obviously, I play with so many times. I've been Siobhan's sister, and I've been her mother and her father. Like, I've been Siobhan's mom before. I was Adrienne when Abernant, right? I was Cara Melinda Rocks. Like, I've been Siobhan's mom plenty of times, but now we're just doing it longer form, and I can't be anybody else at the same time.
I love it. It's so much fun. They are so chaotically insane, and then you try to be like, okay, reel it in. It's so funny.
That's the fun part, is trying to play Tula with whatever, camp counselor, child education skills I have in my own background of looking at kids that have a lot of energy. And I think with Tula, I wanted to be very conscious that she is the opposite of the like finger wagging mom, that when she sets a boundary, she tries to be really judicious about it and do it when it actually matters, and also to come at everything with the right temperature. That if there's something where like one of her kids has been rude, that she doesn't always come in at a 10, that if something is a small transgression, it has a small response that's proportional to it, because otherwise you lose credibility. If everything's always an emergency, it's like someone who puts sirens in the subject of every email. Like, people will start to ignore you if everything is always top urgency.
How does it feel to be in the 20th season of Dimension 20?
Tula sees her kids' idiosyncrasies as positive and as wonderful. Like, Jason's jumping around, he's super hyper. And I think that, there's a version of a mom that would be like, Jason, stop jumping around. But for Tula, it's very much like, no, that's like, he's wonderful and he's got all this energy and he's a child and he's good. And as he grows up, his journey will be focusing and harnessing that energy. But that's the journey he's on. And like, you see when they're fleeing that she's like, Jason, can you focus and lead us out of here? And that I think there's a lot of things that I aspire to in Tula, of like, your kids' idiosyncrasies are strengths and gifts, and how do you give them the right structure and channel for them to be who they're going to be? How do you make sure that Lila is solving puzzles and finding clues in a way that's constructive and helpful? And how do you make sure that Jason's energy is going towards things that are going to help him grow and learn? And it's fun. I like it. I love Tula.
How does it feel being in the 20th season of Dimension 20? And what have you learned over the course of these 5 years?
I feel like it's been 20 years. I feel like I feel like a whole different person. The answer to what I have learned over the last years is I'm a whole different guy, I feel like. And a lot of it has to do with things that are very germane to Tula. It's kind of fitting that she's the character in the 20th season of the show, because she's how would you put it? Because over the years, Dimension 20 has gotten bigger and bigger,
Mhm.
And most of what I have learned is not just about being a game master, but about being um, one of the creators of the show and about taking care of the cast and crew, about providing an environment where people feel safe, that they can bring their skills and their artistry and they can bring their full creative selves to this process and find an environment that is collaborative and fun and safe and feels like totally like professional and congenial and warm and safe.
I'm very excited for Fantasy High junior year.
Let's go. Let's go.
Fans have been waiting for it and wanting it for years. How did you know that you had found the right story to bring the bad kids back again?
I couldn't stop dreaming about it. And I couldn't stop thinking about the beginning. I had the moment that I knew I wanted to be the first moment of the return. And I also knew what I wanted to be the kind of like central thing at work in the season. So it was really, really fun. Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was really, really great. And without spoiling anything for junior year, I think that we found a way to come back to the world that totally satisfied our deep love and attachment to the characters, while also reminding people that this started really silly and by gum, it's going to stay really silly. And it was very wonderful to come back in that.
That is what I like to hear, because I love just the insanity of Fantasy High. Like, I remember watching that in that big moment where everything changed because Edward pulled out the gun and I lost my mind.
Episode two. I love it. Sweet dear Arthur Egg for it. It's great.
And it feels like Abria's kind of thrown down the gauntlet. I mean, she did the animated puppet show. She's done the battle map inside a bear. How are you going to match that? How are you going to up your ante?
I can't. I can't. Abria's great. What do you want me to say? Abria's too good. Abria has been behind so many of the most pivotal and exceptional leaps forward in the show's language. Ran our first ran Kids on Brooms for the first time. First not me GM in the Dome. Was in our the projections on the wall for the Misfits and Magic holiday special. The flowers of A Court of Faded Flower, all throughout. Abria is an incredible innovator. She's got an amazing ability to marry together all of the elements of production and game design and gameplay. Abria throwing down the gauntlet. If Abria walked up and slapped me in the face with a glove and challenged me to a duel, I would just give what's the other thing you do other than go fight the duel? You give you the satisfaction,
I surrender, basically.
Yeah, I would surrender. I would surrender in a duel with Abria, 100%.
I love it. And I have a couple more Fantasy High questions, but they're not spoilery.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a particular NPC you're really excited to jump back into from that world?
I'm going to say that actually the fun thing about junior year is all of the new NPCs I'm excited to introduce to the world. That's actually the thing that I'm there are definitely NPCs that I'm excited to go back and re-inhabit. But I think one of the main things that I was excited to do with junior year was I wanted to avoid, because it's been a couple of years since we went back, I wanted to avoid the feeling of every episode is like the sitcom actor that you know and love walks in and everyone just cheers because they recognize them. I wanted it to feel as meaningfully a new entry in the Fantasy High story as sophomore year was, right? So It's like, so I'm very excited to play some old beloved NPCs, but I'm also very excited for all the new NPCs that you'll be seeing this season.
With Dimension 20 being an anthology series, what is it about particular seasons like Fantasy High that make you guys want to return to the characters and explore further arcs with them versus storylines where we really are contained to one season?
It's different for everyone. And I think that with Fantasy High obviously stays present in our minds because it stays present in the minds of our viewers, right? Like any given day, you can go online and see amazing fan art of the current season of Dimension 20 and 4 new pieces of Fantasy High fan art, even though sophomore year ended almost 4 years ago, right? Like, so it's a wild thing where it has stayed in the minds of fans in a big way, but that would never alone be a reason for us to go do it, because we know that, like, when you're playing at the table, it has to be authentic and felt in order for you to like bring the magic you need to bring to it. So the main thing for Fantasy High is that we go back to settings when we have something to say in them, right? Like, sophomore year, we did because it felt like a really fun continuation and we wanted to see the bad kids on an adventure. We went back to the Unsleeping City because it felt like that story had just sort of started. Like season 1 happened and then season 2 felt like there was another really fun place to go back to for it. And, I think we've gone back to a couple other Misfits and Magic Holiday Special, the Ravening War. Like, we've revisited some worlds because I think there was a specific plot we were excited about. And I think that there are some settings where we will look at them and go, that feels really concluded, right? Like, for me, I feel like where we left the Unsleeping City, I feel so satisfied with the ending of Unsleeping City Chapter 2, with the big spoilers, with the big, barbecue and everything else like that. It just felt very wonderful. For Fantasy High, where we left it, we left it on a cliffhanger. We left it on, like the Night York exploding out of Riz's chest, which is a little bit of a joke, but there does always feel like something where they're still teenage heroes. They're still going through high school. There's still lots of new things to come up. So I think that there is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Sometimes a story just starts telling you that it's not over yet.
I'm personally really hoping the Seven story isn't over, because I love the Seven so much. And Aria said she was down when I talked to her. So I really hope you guys do that.
Oh my God. Bria and Antiope Jones. Oh, how can you? Yeah. You are never late. You are always on time. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. Yes, a lot going on with, like, the world of Spire also, just like you're saying, like the Seven, Pirates of Leviathan, multiple live shows, like Fantasy High, like Spire has the most sort of like adventure already in it. And it's really exciting. It's really, really cool. Really cool.
Are there any other seasons that you'd like to, or settings that you'd like to revisit, like Starstruck Odyssey or Court of Fae and Flowers or Never After? I
love all of those settings so much. When I think of settings that and I'll stick to ones that I have GM'd for, I think Starstruck is one that is really open and there's so much more story to tell there. I think that there's almost like some looking at other ones in a funny way, like Dungeons and Drag Queens was like such a fun side quest. I would love to play with all of them again. But yeah, I think that's really exciting. That's really, really fun.
I mean, you guys, with the 5-year anniversary, announced Dungeons and Drag Queens season 2.
Hell yeah, there you go. Yeah, would be very excited to go back there. All those worlds are really, I feel like I'm very open to returning to all of them. But I would say that, like, some of them, it's almost easier to say which ones. I feel like Unsleeping City Chapter 2 had a wonderful, great resolution. I feel like, but then again, there's always interesting once I start thinking about them, I start thinking about what I would do if I went back to them.
One of the things I find really interesting about this season is it kind of falls into that Crown of Candy Ravening War space where it's very funny, but not just funny. You have a lot of tragedy and trauma and really dark areas that you get to explore with this. What was it like exploring that in a new world? Because with Ravening War, even though you got to explore it as a character, it was a world that you had created. Being
in this very tragic world for Burrows End, I mean, I love tragedy. I love, I think given a shot, part of the reason I picked Tula as well is that Aria wanted to tell a dark story. And, when Matt tells you, I want to do sneaky, underhanded espionage, cloak and dagger, I'm going to make a person that can't roll lower than 20 on a deception check. I'm going to make a sneaky little radish man. And if Aria tells me this is a story about heartbreak, I'm going to make a character that can get the most heartbroken. I want to, in other words, for Aria, what she said she wanted to do in the season, I wanted to make a character that was uniquely vulnerable. So I wanted to make someone with something to lose, and I wanted to make someone that could be hurt.
I hadn't thought about that, but you're totally right. She has connected to everyone.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Sorry, that completely threw me off.
No, I love it. I'm glad.
Can you talk to me a little bit about what you love about Aria as a GM? Because you've been playing with her for a while, not only in the Dome, but with Worlds Beyond Number as well. So what is something that stands out to you with her as a GM and just you guys as collaborators?
Everything. I mean, what stands out to me about Aria Iyengar, that's almost impossible to answer. I mean, she is, well, let's start at the beginning, right? It is fun to be doing anything with Aria Iyengar. It's fun to be near Aria Iyengar. She is a captivating performer, a brilliant voice actor, a phenomenal writer and storyteller. Her command of presence, which is a big part of being a GM, it's kind of hard to even communicate over camera. When Aria wants the room to feel a way, it just happens. When she wants it to feel frightening, when she wants it to feel funny, she has an aura that she can project that just makes the room feel a certain way. She can leap tall buildings in a single bound, can move faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive. She's and in addition to that, she also, I think, is incredible at she understands the assignment of a GM in terms of how to create the overarching structure and all of the connective tissue and move the world around the actions of PCs, right? It's like, she's someone who's driving an 18-wheeler through a parking lot with a group of kids playing, and she's effortlessly they don't have to worry about anything, right? She's oh, I can just whip this massive machine around in honor. You wanted to run left, you dropped a ball behind you, you want to go back and get it, whoop, just and it looks, you're oh my God, how are you responding in the moment with this story? What did you have to change on a dime to honor that choice? And Aria makes it look easy. And then as a technical thing, the part of her that is running creative for the art department and working with Rick Perry to create these battle sets, so you also have to give her flowers, no pun intended, of course, famous flowers. You have to give her flowers as a producer. She's an exceptional producer. She's just, I could be here all day extolling the virtues of her. To have found a storyteller like her and that she wants to work with me is nuts. It's very, very cool. We are all lucky to be living at the same time as Aria Iyengar.
I completely agree, and I love that answer. I'm going to ask one more question. Tula's not psyched about the plan to go towards the scary blue light. What can you maybe tease about next episode? Because the little teaser we got at the end, insane.
Sometimes characters do a job that is part of telling a story. Tula is the living, breathing refusal of the call. And that's what I'll say about her. She is that writ large. She is the refusal of the call. And there are parts of the genres we're talking about. Watership Down, Secret of Nim, a little bit of Animal Farm, a little bit of some other things in there, right? That like, I love shining knights and heroes and honor and heroics and adventure. I love them with all my heart. And that was not the right character for this story. This story needed a character that said, why don't we all be 0th level commoners? Why don't we all go and be not in danger? And and being that character, knowing that I'm going to lose, knowing that I will be outvoted, was an honor and a privilege.
I am so excited for more. Can't wait for more Burrows End. Can't wait for Fantasy High Junior Year, Dungeons and Drag Queens Season 2. Anything you give me, Brennan, I'm just going to be excited.
That's so sweet of you to say. Thank you, Kayla. I appreciate it.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. And I'm excited to talk to you again in the future.